feet there, Chuck, all right? Take it in there, buddy.
They don't consider themselves to be anything special.
We were just a generation that did what we had to do, and we didn't even think about it.
For the last 7 decades, they've lived rather normal lives in Wisconsin. That is until now. A renewed interest in the World War II culture has made them public men.
We want you to take a ride today, okay? We don't want you tuckered out before the day is done.
When stepping off the tour bus in their patriotic caps and polo shirts, people stop and take notice. Even active duty brigadier generals salute them.
You're a general?
I am.
I'm glad to actually shake hands with the general of the 25th Division.
I'm honored to shake your hand, sir.
All right.
They are survivors of one of the most memorable dates in American history, December 7th, 1941. This summer, Milwaukee Public Television followed 19 World War II veterans back to Pearl Harbor. This is one of the more solemn parts of our visit. We just took a shuttle ride over to the USS Arizona Memorial for a private visit and wreath-laying ceremony.
Charles, Harris, Matheson, Verner, Medford, Matheny.
We watched and we listened as they told their stories.
I was going to go down and get some food, you know, but the messenger had said Japanese planes are attacking Ford Island, and this is no shit. He was excited, or
Yes.
he wouldn't have talked like that.
Some shed tears.
I woke up. I saw light, and I'm alive. And how, I do not know, but it's very touchy.
Others expressed their humor.
Permission to come aboard, eh?
Come aboard, sir.
Permission granted.
Thank you.
And reconciled with the past.
Hey, everybody got to live, including the Japanese. And in the process, I have met Japanese who are much younger, but they have I just like them.
The attack yesterday on the Hawaiian Islands has caused severe damage to American naval and military forces. I regret to tell you that very many American lives have been lost.
It happened just before 8 a.m. in the Pacific. American servicemen were enjoying a leisurely Sunday morning. Then suddenly, Pearl Harbor was transformed into a living hell. 88-year-old Furman Balza of Green Bay has another name for it. Tell me about that day on December 7th. What do you remember?
Well, it's Holocaust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Furman Balza was standing on the deck of the USS Maryland when the bombs began to fall. The Maryland was damaged by Japanese torpedoes but survived. The adjacent ship, the USS Oklahoma, wasn't so lucky. It sank, taking more than 400 members of the crew with her. When speaking with Pearl Harbor survivors, you begin to appreciate how the passage of time, more than 70 years, has helped them analyze the many aspects of their experience. Mr. Balza is no exception.
I wouldn't say it was the greatest battle in the Second World War.
Yes, sir.
Because it happened, and it happened right away. You didn't have any time to think about it.
Yeah.
They came and and everything started, and we didn't have time to think about it. But that's not the same as when you're going someplace and you got a whole armada, and it takes you 3 weeks to get there.
Yes, sir.
Then you'll kill yourself maybe 1,000 times before you get there.
Yes. Pearl Harbor is a lesson in the human spirit. In their youth, they were ordinary men performing extraordinary duty.
Want me to read that for you?
Oh, I get the light on it, I can see it.
90-year-old Charles Davis Jr. of Wausau is one of those men. During the raid, the young sailor pulled several of his buddies out of the burning harbor, injuring himself in the process.
They're kind of floundering around, and I was a swimmer, and I thought I could swim right under that fire and help those guys get over to Fort Island. And I tried, and I swam quite a bit underwater, and I needed a breath of air or something. I got up and I splashed around, and then I went back down under, and I kept going. And I got so tired I couldn't hardly move. And then I came to the surface, and I got crude oil in my eyes, and I got first-degree burns in my face and around these bones here.
Despite his own burns, Mr. Davis is still haunted by the image of one sailor in particular.
There was a man that had burns in his face, and I took a cigarette and lit it for him, put it here. And then when I took it out, all the skin came from his chin and everything with it. And that wasn't nice to see.
92-year-old Ewald Koch of Madison is another Pearl Harbor survivor. His friends call him Cookie. The return visit to Hickam Field had special meaning for him. The original walls still contain huge gouges from enemy strafing. On December 7th, the young airman was pinned to the ground by hot shrapnel as Hickam came under heavy attack. How chaotic was it?
Well, it was pretty chaotic because one of the fellas he got behind one of the trees out there and he lost his face. And when I was under the car with another boy from the 72nd, right at the attack, he says, "My foot's gone."
Historian Olaf Holst says the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor was well planned and executed.
The dive bombers came out of the sun, and that makes it difficult for American gunners to shoot at them. They flew in from the east. They would make their approach at a 60-degree angle on their targets and drop their bombs at about a 300-foot altitude, so they were guaranteed a hit and then fly off into the distance. At the same time, the torpedo planes came through Southeast Lock, and as they did, they lowered their altitude to only 25 to 30 feet off the water. They would drop their torpedoes and then peel off above their targets to get away. Now, the reason they were dropping their torpedoes so low is because our harbor is only 40 feet deep.
Olaf Holst goes on to explain why Pearl Harbor became so important to the Japanese.
The Japanese had a plan to take Southeast Asia. Because of the war in Europe, the colonial powers, such as the British, the Dutch, the French, could no longer defend their colonial assets in Southeast Asia. Japan was a resource-poor nation. They needed the resources of Southeast Asia to build their empire. The only thing standing in their way was the United States Pacific Fleet.
Well, you sober up a lot after an experience like that.
92-year-old George Hutton of Madison was standing on the USS Nevada when those dive bombers and torpedo planes were attacking Battleship Row.
If you've been a kid, carefree guy without any responsibilities, I'm sure that you assume a feeling of responsibility and soberness, you know. Things are not that happy-go-lucky anymore.
The USS Nevada managed to break free, but didn't get far. She was ultimately beached after succumbing to extensive damage and heavy casualties.
Mr. Hutton, how do you stay focused when there are casualties all around you? How do you stay focused on your job?
Oh, I think probably your training is the thing that saves you. That and the fact that you want to help these guys.
91-year-old Joseph Sweeney of La Crosse still counts his blessings when he recalls his brush with death on December 7th. When Sweeney reported to his battle station aboard the USS Whitney, a Japanese pilot was bearing down on his position.
Coming right at me, ball, eyeball to eyeball. Stared me right in the eye, and I thought, please turn off. And he did. At the last second, he tipped his wings. Flew over the bow and up over the mountainside. I can still see his white teeth grinning at me, yet thank God he missed me.
You came that close, you could actually see the face of the pilot.
Yeah, I saw his white teeth.
Did you fire?
I had no gun.
You had no gun?
No. Most of us didn't have any gun, no. None at all. Most of the time, in the beginning, they were locked up.
Shipmate Roland Breyer was preparing to leave the Whitney for church services when the bombing started. Mr. Breyer, who's now 90 years old and lives in Green Bay, remembers being ordered to take cover below the deck.
What were you thinking during that that attack?
Because there were two attacks. They came twice, you know.
What was going through your minds? What were you guys talking about?
I don't know. It's just we couldn't didn't think. I guess I don't know.
And then when it was,
I think at any moment we would be blown up. You know.
You really did. You really did.
Yeah.
I was right down in this area. Here you can see the rows of airplanes that I spoke about. See them?
And that's just total chaos. Total chaos. You're in the middle of thick, dark smoke.
Down in the smoke area.
I mean, just to breathe. How did you breathe? The smoke was all around you.
All around. You just did it.
9-year-old Ken Sweet of Milwaukee was on guard duty at Willer Field when the bombing started. Despite the thick smoke, he and his buddies began salvaging whatever aircraft they could in hopes of defending the harbor.
Obviously, you couldn't see.
No, you couldn't see too much. That's why we're among the burning airplanes. That's why we stayed away and separating these that were not on fire yet. And in that area was some of both.
You must have been burned.
No.
92-year-old Ed McClavick of Brookfield remembers the chaos at Willer Field as well. When the barracks behind him blew up, the young airman was forced to take cover elsewhere.
We went across about 3 blocks away from the barracks into a non-commissioned officer's home.
So you actually took cover in a residence?
In a residence, behind the refrigerator.
Meanwhile, back in the harbor, a young sailor named Bernard Duchateau and his shipmates aboard the USS Dale were taking aim at the sky.
Oh yeah, we've got 2 planes on the way out. They tried to sink us where the Nevada was grounded, but that's where they made the mistakes.
Mr. Duchateau, who is 91 years old and lives in Green Bay, recalls the incident as if it were yesterday.
And your ship was able to take 2 aircraft out, you said?
Yeah. Yeah, one of the machine guns, just as it was going by, Gregory shot that plane up. And then there was 2 more, they said, behind that one. They turned away.
Why do you suppose that you and your crewmates were spared?
Not because we were all good fellows, but I guess we were just not supposed to die.
Bernard Duchateau was among the lucky ones. U.S. casualties were extensive. More than 2,300 Americans were killed. Over 1,100 were wounded. Pearl Harbor's fleet and air support were devastated. 8 battleships were damaged. 5 of them sunk. Numerous other vessels were disabled. 164 planes were destroyed. 159 were damaged. The deadly attack drew U.S. forces into World War II and changed the course of American history.
That's the way we call these guys.
Oh boy, anchors away.
The salute is more than 70 years late, but this group of vintage warriors appreciates it just the same. It's all part of a celebrated send-off to a special time and place. In a sense, Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941, keeps them forever young. Some of the survivors have already made it back privately, even several times. For others, it's their first pilgrimage since the war. The Fox Valley-based nonprofit Old Glory Honor Flight undertook the Pearl Harbor mission. Organization President Drew McDonald says it was for a good reason.
First of all, this is where it started. You know, the world changed on that particular day, and the gentlemen that are with us on this trip saw it firsthand. You know, we can see history in the movies and the magazines and then the history book, but we can also look into the eyes of these veterans and get their stories, firsthand accounts of what happened.
Good to see you. Thanks for being here. Thank you for your service. Appreciate it.
American Airlines captain Jim Palmersheim was on hand greeting vets for their Chicago departure. Palmersheim's airline helped underwrite the Pearl Harbor trip. As an Army veteran himself, he took special pride in being a sponsor.
You know, December 7th, 1941, as the President said, a day that will live in infamy. It defined the lives of these veterans. It defined who they became. It defined the men that they became, the families that they raised, their sons, daughters, and grandkids. And now as they're looking at the final chapter of their life, hopefully when they're there and they reflect back on that horrific day, they can be very proud of their service, be proud of who they became, and be proud of the nation whose freedom endured because of their sacrifice. And I hope that we provide a sense of closure, a sense of pride, and a sense of healing that will be paid forward to their legacy.
The first full day in Honolulu began early. First stop on the Home of the Brave tour, the USS Arizona Visitor Center.
The beauty and serenity of the harbor was in sharp contrast to what the survivors experienced more than 70 years ago. The presence of the Wisconsin veterans in the harbor was most significant. U.S. Park Service officials tell us it was one of the largest groups of vets to visit the center in recent memory. Furman Balza considers the local landscape as part of his rite of passage.
Sir?
When I came here as a little kid, 17 years old in 1941, I celebrated my 18th birthday right here in Pearl Harbor.
I can see that real easy.
Charles Davis Jr. had a special interest in the historical markers he encountered along the way.
We repaired other ships. Maybe repaired some of their guns or something, but we went aboard other ships and did repairs.
Mr. Davis says the shipyard has changed a lot since 1941.
How has the yard changed since your service here?
Too many vehicles, too many boats, too many buildings. That's mostly, everything is more and better.
Returning to the hallowed ground stirred up plenty of memories for the Wisconsin veterans. Some of those memories have been bottled up for years since coming home from the war.
Have you shared many of these stories with your family over the years?
No.
Why not?
Never talked about it.
Why didn't you want to tell them?
I didn't think I was no hero or anything. I didn't get wounded, and I figured I was lucky.
93-year-old George Belair of Green Bay was awakened in the barracks when the bombing started. The young Marine rolled out of bed, grabbed his weapon, ammunition, and headed for the parade grounds.
Well, you can't do much with a rifle against airplanes, but there was no, the bombing was all around us. They must have been hitting naval ships, and so what they did was strafe around us.
So when they were strafing, I mean, obviously you were taking cover.
Yeah.
What is it like to be, undercover and, the enemy is firing all around you? What thoughts go through your mind?
You don't have time to think. You just act.
The Visitor Center is dedicated to both the American and Japanese perspective of December 7th. Various exhibits and memorabilia depict the military might and strategy of both cultures. Such is the case at numerous museums and historical attractions throughout the region. It's believed an estimated 1 million Japanese tourists visit Pearl Harbor each year. I asked Olaf Holst why the Japanese people apparently know very little about what happened here.
And I asked that question myself many years ago of a former Japanese naval officer. And he gave me an interesting response. He said between 1/2 to 2/3 of the Japanese people he met that he would take to Pearl Harbor did not know who attacked Pearl Harbor. It is something that is not talked about in Japan because of their culture. It was the start of World War II for us, but World War II had begun for them several years earlier, but it represented to them the demise of the Japanese Empire initially.
One of the most impressive monuments on the tour stands at nearby Schofield Barracks. It's called United by Sacrifice. The design is dedicated to the multicultural contributions of servicemen and women throughout the decades. Brigadier General Paul LaCamera explained the significance of the depiction to his Wisconsin visitors.
It was originally just going to be the one soldier from the Afghan-Iraq time frame, and what the Division Association added with the other 3. And what you see is Vietnam, Korea, and then the World War II veteran that stands behind it. And at night, and you see their different colors, and at night they appear ghost-like, because as you can see that what you guys started, our soldiers have continued. And so it's a tremendous honor for me to shake your hands and welcome you back to Hawaii under a lot better circumstances, right?
Brigadier General LaCamera then handed out special pins to commemorate their visit. It was a touching moment of mutual respect and admiration. The visit to Schofield Barracks had special meaning for 91-year-old Jerry Jerome of West Bend. This is where the young Army Supply Sergeant was stationed on December 7th as the buzz of enemy aircraft was approaching from the distance.
So I pulled on my pants and opened up the doors and went out there, and the sky was just filled with these Japanese planes flying. They were going from that way to that way. And they were probably coming in through Kolikoli Pass, which was not too far from where I was. Well, when I saw that happen, I realized that I had a job to do. I went back into my supply room and broke open the ammunition and got the machine guns out.
Mr. Jerome also remembers how his building came under friendly fire during the heat of battle.
During the raid by the Japanese, a 5-inch anti-aircraft shell from the Navy came right down through our barracks. I don't know exactly what time that happened because I didn't hear it happen. There was so much noise going on.
We're on Ford Island, and this is a memorial to the USS Utah and all that's left from the wreckage of the ship.
Within the opening minutes of the raid, the Utah was mortally damaged. Master Chief Brian Ortega knows the story of the USS Utah well. He often passes the memorial during his command and regards the wreckage as an inspiration.
It's huge because I'm able to wear the uniform now because of the men who fought for us in World War II, and the men have died here, especially on the Utah on this site. What we do is awesome. Preserve our treasure and our heritage. She was moored up here just like the Arizona was, and she took significant hits, and then she finally turned as you see her there. She turned, and there was some obviously sailors that died that day that are still on board.
Though most of the Utah's crew managed to escape, 6 officers and 52 enlisted men went down in the battle. Viewing the rusty remains of the ship prompted a gentle moment between 2 survivors in our group.
We've been together for 70 years.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, we still do whatever. Picnics and lunches and breakfasts, not baked beans.
SOS.
Would you have a chance to talk to us a little bit about the Oklahoma? You're coming up to the memorial now.
92-year-old Herbert Meyer of Berlin, Wisconsin, was assigned to the USS Oklahoma on December 7th. Meyer served as captain of one of the 3-gun turrets on the ship. The Oklahoma took the brunt of the Japanese attack with numerous torpedo hits. Mr. Meyer lost 429 of his shipmates in the fight, including 3 brothers from Wisconsin, Leroy, Randolph, and Malcolm Barber.
There's a hatch on the bottom of the...
Could you get your head out?
Down to the deck and walked over the deck as it went down.
Yes.
I stayed on the deck until it just completely turned over.
You were one of the last people off, right?
Close to it, yeah.
Your country is very proud of you, sir.
Pardon?
Your country is very proud of you. You know that, don't you?
Even so, Herbert Meyer still grieves for the men who didn't make it.
2 of them wanted the Congressional Medal posthumously, but they stayed down and were stationed on 14 magazines. There was 5 ammunition to the chamber, gun chambers above us. And they were trapped down there, and they held the lights. Others too.
Actually, I think it's.
And they paid for it.
Aloha.
Aloha. Aloha.
More kisses.
Wisconsin veterans received a warm welcome at the Pacific Aviation Museum. The museum features an array of warbirds, both American and the famous Japanese Zero aircraft.
What kind of engine? This one has it's a Sakai 12 originally.
The Wisconsin veterans had a particular interest in learning more about the Zero.
The opponents suffered high losses in aircraft and ships, but those of the United States were soon replaced, while those of Japan were not.
The visit also included multimedia presentations, nostalgic billboards, historic photographs, and detailed examples of Pearl Harbor's weapons of mass destruction. 90-year-old Lee Noor of Brown Deer helped make it possible for doctors to treat the wounded. As a young sailor at Pearl Harbor, Noor was assigned to a Navy construction team.
We thank you.
Following the raid, he and his buddies went into high gear, erecting a series of medical buildings.
One day when the war started, we put up 13 of them in one day.
In one day.
In one day.
Were they sort of like prefabricated construction as we know
No,
it today?
you had to bolt them together.
Sure.
They were panels.
Mr. Norris says it didn't take long before those buildings were in use.
As soon as you get a piece of plywood down on there, a bed would come in. And as soon as you get a bed, mattress would come in. As soon as you get mattress on, sheets and the guy would come in. Sheets would come in and a guy would come in. And before we get all the way down to the end, the place would be folded up.
Lee Noor is one more example of an ordinary guy at Pearl Harbor who was called upon to do extraordinary things. The National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific is sacred ground. The visit to the 116-acre property had special meaning to our Wisconsin veterans. Nearly 800 casualties from the attack on Pearl Harbor were among the first to be interred here. The remains of veterans from other conflicts, such as Korea, Vietnam, and Afghanistan, are also present.
It's one of the most breathtaking views in all of Hawaii. The Pacific Ocean lies to the west, and over here to the east is the cemetery. The locals simply refer to it as the Punch Bowl because the grave markers literally are lined up within a crater.
A young Marine named Clyde Stevenson and his buddies were assigned to guard the beach against a possible Japanese invasion on December 7th. Now at the age of 92, the Appleton resident is on another important mission, to locate the grave of his brother. Mr. Stevenson's brother Glenwood died in 1942 when his military aircraft struck a mountain en route to Australia. With the help of a compassionate curator, Mr. Stevenson was able to find his brother's marker.
This area has been freshly renovated and they just put the sod down yesterday, so excuse the condition. It's right here.
I guess like looking at any relative's gravesite, it kind of remind you of the old days. He and I were both born in Milwaukee.
What was it like growing up with your brother in Milwaukee?
Well, he was 6 years older, and I had 2 other brothers between him and me, and so, you know, this was 4 brothers. So then he went to West Point, and we graduated from West Point that was in 1940, and then he went into aviation.
Salute, guys! Everybody salute! Present arms! Lead! Lead! There we go, lead! Present arms! There you go!
Visiting the Punch Bowl was a melancholy experience for the Wisconsin veterans. It offered a bonding moment with fallen colleagues surrounded by the natural beauty of the land where they once served with great honor. Polly Lookout offered another panoramic view of the Hawaiian landscape. Wisconsin veterans and their guardians clearly enjoyed the scenery as they braced themselves against the gusty winds. Historian Olaf Host says Polly Lookout is known for its battles as well as its beauty.
You've got the breakers, the waves coming in over the reef. Just a gorgeous place, but it's significant military history, not only from the December 7 attack, but also King Kamehameha. His final battle took place there, where from that point on, he was now master of the Hawaiian Islands and the Kingdom of Hawaii had been established.
But perhaps the most lighthearted time of the trip occurred during this brief stop, the home of the Brave World War II Museum and Gift Shop. With the 1940s music playing in the background, Wisconsin vets got to browse among the novelties and souvenirs, enjoy the model train circling overhead, even slip behind the wheel of a vintage Army Jeep. The sights and sounds and intimacy of the surroundings seemed to make the guys feel like kids again. It was a memorable moment. It could be argued that guardian angels were looking out for survivors of the December 7th, 1941 attack on Pearl Harbor. One thing we do know is that guardians of a more human nature are essential to the Old Glory Honor Flight mission, not just to Hawaii, but on regular trips to our nation's capital. One of the guardians we came to know on the Pearl Harbor trip is Judy Durkee of Rhinelander. Judy regards the special World War II veteran in her life as a second father, and for good reason. More about her story in a moment. The other guardian who caught our attention is Jane Whitish of Hollandale in southwestern Wisconsin. Jane accompanied her father, 90-year-old Amos Peterson of nearby Blanchardville, with great care and affection. Mr. Peterson was a member of the Army Air Corps and assigned to Wheeler Field during the bombing. Maybe the angels were with him that day, because one of those bombs struck the building where young Amos was taking cover, sending him through the air and knocking him unconscious. The injuries from the trauma remain with him today.
I don't hear, I don't see like I should, hearing, and it's very...
And it's all from the war. It's all from that day.
Oh, yes.
I have been watching you and your daughter, Jane.
Yes.
Okay. And it's obvious that she loves you very much.
Yes.
And I am enjoying watching you and your daughter visiting Pearl Harbor, taking in the sights. It's a joy. I've been riding on the bus with you. It's a joy to watch you and your daughter here. And I know you're very close. Jane, tell me why it's so important to be here with your father.
Well, we've heard stories all our life, and like just to come here and to be able to put our finger in a bullet hole that he said was in the cement, and for our fingers to fit into the bullet hole was just a realization that, wow, we're lucky to have our father with us. And to be in with all the veterans and coming with the honor flight has been a tremendous learning experience, because even though we've been here before to Hawaii, each time is totally different, and each time we discover something that we go home and say, we've done everything, we've seen everything, and this time when we come back, there was even more to discover. And then being with all the other veterans is just such an honor, and it gives us goosebumps, because they are our heroes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That brings us back to Judy Durkee's story. She's the baby pictured in her mother Evelyn's lap, along with her father, Private Glenn Ward. Private Ward never made it home from the war. He was killed in the Battle of the Bulge. 94-year-old Walter Wendt of Rhinelander did survive the war, including the raid on Pearl Harbor. As a young sailor, Mr. Wendt was assigned to the USS Helena. The light cruiser took numerous hits and extensive casualties. But Mr. Wendt and his shipmates never lost their will.
We did get steam up and tested out the main engines, but we never, of course, left dock. We were already hurt too bad.
And you took 3 torpedo hits.
3 torpedo hits.
And you still stayed below trying to keep the engines going.
Well, we kept the engines going, but our main objective was to keep the water from coming in.
Because my father didn't come back from the war. He was killed in the Battle of the Bulge. He was an 82nd Airborne paratrooper.
Yeah.
And when Pearl Harbor happened on Sunday, my dad went down on Monday and enlisted. And he wanted to be a paratrooper. He was 21 years old. So he didn't come home. He was killed on January 30th, 1945. And my mother started to date Walt. Because after he was killed, she was widowed, I was orphaned, and Walter stepped in the picture and took care of both of us. And he's been taking care of me all these years.
Not physically. She's well able to take care of herself.
He's a hero. He's a hero in so many ways.
And now, Judy Durkee is helping take care of the man who became her father figure, just as Jane Whitish is looking out for her father. There comes a time when even heroes need guardians too, whether heavenly or of the more human kind. 19 Wisconsin veterans embarked on their return trip to Pearl Harbor. Only 18 actually made it. 89-year-old Mark Scheidel of Sparta was among the first veterans off the bus at O'Hare Airport in Chicago. He was clearly looking forward to the flight and enjoying the official send-off that included well wishes and a performance by a military band. A short time later, Mr. Scheidel died of a heart attack en route to Hawaii. His death hit everyone hard. But the mission to Pearl Harbor continued in his memory. It was a prime example of the emotional strength and human spirit among a special group of men. Old Glory Honor Flight President Drew McDonald helps put the loss in perspective.
We know for a fact that Mark was very excited to come on this flight. He very much enjoyed the pageantry and the celebration. And that send-off that we had in Chicago was his last event. And how many of us go out where an event was in our honor and then we pass? And the answer is very seldom. So we're proud that we were able to be there for Mark. A very small part of his life, but we think a very important part.
Mark Scheidel was a Navy veteran assigned to the USS Boggs on December 7th. The Boggs was returning from sea duty and approaching the harbor at the time of the attack. The crew immediately began sweeping for mines and picking up survivors. During our visit, the flag at Schofield Barracks was flown at half-mast in Mr. Scheidel's honor. And Brigadier General Paul LaCamera expressed his sympathies to the Wisconsin vets.
Now, our condolences for the loss of your comrade on the way over here. Hey, what you guys started 70 plus years ago, I would tell you that the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines that are operating on the battlefields today are walking in your shoes and doing a great job. And this is pretty hallowed ground to us.
As a young man seeking adventure, Mark joined the Navy and reported for duty in Pearl Harbor.
Mark Scheidel was also paid tribute during a memorial service for Pearl Harbor victims near the wreckage of the USS Arizona. A flag from that service was later given to members of Mr. Scheidel's family. The presentation was quietly made following the group's return flight to Chicago. Mr. Scheidl's passing illustrates the vulnerability of the greatest generation. More than 1,000 World War II veterans are dying a day. That's why the sharing of their individual stories is so urgent, and why missions like the trip to Pearl Harbor are so appropriate in return for service to their country.
Blue is in northeast Wisconsin. Everyone else has just a blue string lanyard, names on both sides.
It's only 3 days before the Old Glory Honor Flight Group is about to embark on its biggest mission. The Appleton-based nonprofit has been flying World War II veterans to Washington, D.C. since the fall of 2009. But taking 19 Pearl Harbor vets on a 5-day trip to Hawaii is a whole different story. It took about 6 months in the making. The Appleton gathering of leadership and volunteers was called to make sure everyone was on the same page.
So you'll be able to find them just like that. So there's one of these in each medical bag. When we do have an issue,
Old Glory Honor Flight President Drew McDonald is an attorney by profession. His wife Diane is treasurer of the group and serves as fundraising manager for St. Elizabeth Hospital in Appleton. Both are deeply involved in outreach to the veterans. On the last day of our visit in Hawaii, we sat down to talk about fulfilling their Pearl Harbor mission.
We kind of did everything at one time because there really wasn't a lot of time. It was actively fundraising and looking for corporate sponsors. It was also identifying the Pearl Harbor survivors in our state, which was not really an easy task. There's not a lot of paperwork out there and record keeping.
There's just so many moving parts to the flight. When we take a Washington, D.C. flight, we depart in the morning, we come back in the evening, and it's a very complicated flight. You multiply that times 3 or 4 for this particular flight, and each day setting the itinerary and making sure everybody was where they needed to be at the right time. It's like herding cats. It's a lot of organization, and we have a really rock solid team on our board of directors that helped us put this together.
Drew McDonald says the individual guardians assigned to the vets play an important role during the honor flights to Washington. And that role was especially important to the success of the Pearl Harbor mission.
Like typically, there's a lot of people that are volunteering to come along as a guardian. They pay their own way on the flight for the honor of coming along and spend time with a World War II vet. On this particular flight, because we had overnight stays in the hotel, we wanted to make sure we had a family member guardian for each veteran. So we really recruited from within their family or circle of friends to find an appropriate guardian for them. And the training is important. We need to reach out and tell them what they need to be careful of and what they need to look out for and what they need to expect, because our job as organizers and their job as guardians is to make sure our guests of honor, that being the World War II veterans, have that tour of honor. They don't have to worry about anything. They're taken care of and they're kept safe.
It's obvious that Diane McDonald develops a nurturing relationship with the veterans on the trips, and such was the case on the flight to Pearl Harbor. She believes it's not only important to know them as individuals, but appreciate the stories behind their service.
They're so special in their own way, and as an organization, we just love our World War II vets, all veterans of course, but certainly these guys are very, very special. And it's easy to look across the room and say, little old guy, look at him. Well, that old guy was jumping out of an airplane. He was sleeping in a foxhole, and I think that it's easy to forget that. And that's something that we don't want to forget. We want to remember these guys for the sacrifices that they made, for the families that they've lost, the friends that they made that they don't have anymore.
It's Saturday night, and our Wisconsin veterans have a very special dinner invitation aboard the USS Missouri.
Coming aboard the USS Missouri was more than a casual visit.
Got it.
It was a symbolic closure to an emotional journey that began more than 70 years ago. These are the men who experienced America's initial engagement with the enemy in World War II. And the USS Missouri is the ship that later hosted the Japanese Empire's official surrender to American forces. It happened in Tokyo Bay on September 2, 1945. Now the Missouri is a major tourist attraction in Pearl Harbor itself, where it all began. The battleship's interior is well lined with historic images of the Japanese surrender. U.S. sailors lean forward to catch a better glimpse of the formalities being held below. General Douglas MacArthur, the Supreme Allied Commander, reads from the text of his prepared remarks. "I pray that peace be now restored," says MacArthur, "to the world and that God will preserve it always." Japanese representatives listen intently, dressed in formal military and civilian attire. Perhaps the most compelling image is the actual signing of the documents acknowledging the Japanese defeat. But the bitter feelings didn't last long. Historian Olaf Holst says General MacArthur was instrumental in forging a new alliance with our former enemy.
He wanted to show that Americans were able to forgive and help rather than strip the nation of its spoils and devastate it. Japan had already been devastated during the bombings. Japan was a defeated nation and they knew it. It was a shock to the Japanese people because Japan had not received such a devastating blow in its history. Douglas MacArthur went in to help, and the people who were alive at that time admired and respected him and America for doing such. And because of that, very quickly, Japan became one of our strongest allies.
The Wisconsin veterans clearly enjoyed their evening aboard the Missouri, roaming the decks, climbing the ladders, absorbing her history and might, and hamming it up for the cameras. Throughout the trip, the Wisconsin survivors have been reminded of their former foe. The memories of Japanese bombers have followed them through the harbor, the museums, their personal stories, on the deck of the surrender ship, and in their hearts. Some Wisconsin survivors have already begun to reconcile.
Do you forgive the enemy pilots who attacked Pearl Harbor?
I have been taught forgive and forget. You know, I've been taught that from the beginning that forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us.
For others, it's a work in progress.
Have you reconciled with the Japanese flyers?
I won't buy a Japanese car. You know, I can't hate anybody that long.
Olaf Holst believes that when it comes to Pearl Harbor, closure is important in the lives of those who experienced it firsthand.
The most significant event in their lives was Pearl Harbor, more than likely. The most dramatic event, the most life-changing event. But when they get to come back and see what has happened in the 70 years that's taken place, and to realize that all has been settled, that now both Japan and America have become the closest of friends and allies, then it allows them to put that behind them. It allows them to relax and allow peace to come to their hearts and minds so that they can face the future without having any bitterness.
More than 7 decades ago, this special group of Wisconsin men witnessed bombs falling from the skies over Pearl Harbor. This time, it was a rainbow. The return to Pearl by our 19 survivors was the fulfillment of a 4-year-old movement in Wisconsin. The mission is simple: to honor the contributions made by World War II veterans from across the state. There are now a total of 6 Honor Flight chapters in Wisconsin. Together, they've flown some 5,000 World War II vets to Washington, D.C. The trips have provided veterans an opportunity to experience the monuments and other military tributes firsthand.
Welcome, everyone, to Field of Honor, a salute unlike any that's happened before. Thank you for coming to our stadium-sized tribute in honor of the greatest generation, our World War II heroes.
The collective effort was celebrated during a special statewide gathering on August 11th at Miller Park.
We've touched a nerve here, and I think just in time, because we're losing such a significant part of our history as these veterans pass away. You know, one every 90 seconds now in this country.
Joe Dean is founder of the Port Washington-based Stars and Stripes Honor Flight chapter.
It's important because these men and women as teenagers were plucked off their farms and plucked from their homes and were reluctant warriors. We didn't want to get involved in this war. They were generally a peace-loving people that was called on to defend our republic when we needed their courage desperately.
We couldn't go to the main PX, and if we went up there, we had to stand outside and have a white man to go in and buy cigarettes or soap for us. We could never go. We couldn't go in the main PX. They was in there shooting pools and drinking beer and having, playing music, but we could not go in.
91-year-old James McKee of Milwaukee is one of those men. Mr. McKee attended gunnery school in hopes of earning a spot on a flight crew. The Army had other plans. Although 2.5 million African Americans served in uniform during the war, color barriers were still a reality.
But whites wouldn't serve. They wouldn't let you fly. They would serve with you. They refused to fly with you. So that put it out there. So you had to find something else. We got into Texas that morning, and we went into a place called Greg Harvey restaurant. They would feed the German prisoners, but they wouldn't let the black soldiers in there, and they wouldn't let even black guys with guard the guard. The Germans go in there. Now that's in you talking about hurting. Now that was a hurt.
His hopes never fulfilled, Mr. McKee still took pride in his service, refueling and parking military aircraft. Last June, 66 years after hanging up his uniform, James McKee was finally welcomed aboard as an honored guest. And when he landed in Washington, the historic Buffalo Soldiers Group was there to greet him. It was a memorable trip for a patriot who had waited so long to feel appreciated. So what does the Honor Flight program mean to World War II veterans in Wisconsin? Just listen.
It was the most enjoyable thing, and I have a little girl, when before we got on the bus, a little girl about that big, give me a little thing, say thank you, say I got it on my shirt, and I thought that I cried. I swear that the little girl about this, about we couldn't have been more than 4 or 5 years old. We gave us everything, and I never had everything I did on that flight was eat. And that whole entire we was out there in Washington. Whenever we go to any of those monuments, you were never hungry, because they always see that you had plenty to eat.
Before 91-year-old Father Larry Jonas signed up for the Jesuits, he served his country.
I told them I could type 55 words a minute. Well, they gave me a test, I got 45, and they practically embraced me. They said, "You're going to be in an office."
The Army Air Corps sent him to Nigeria, where he and his buddies helped supply the U.S. forces in South Asia.
We supplied by air supplies to the Burma-India theater of war, sending pilots and equipment and parts and things like that.
Last April, Father Jonas was invited to take an honor flight to Washington, D.C. World War II hero and former U.S. Senator Bob Dole was among his greeters. He, too, says it was the experience of a lifetime.
Where there's unity, friendship, everyone is just one with each other, of one heart and one mind.
Father Jonas also says his wartime experience helped lead him to his priestly vocation.
There was real poverty over there, and I think it gave me a spirit of compassion for other people. And I felt that I could be of service in the priesthood, helping people in one way or another.
Our World War II veterans are still on a mission. In their youth, we labeled them as heroes. Today, we've come to appreciate their graceful manner. They are survivors of the battlefield and post-war life itself. Their personal stories and perspectives help define the meaning of will, compassion, dignity, and reconciliation. The greatest generation? Maybe. The reference might in fact be too heavy to bear. One thing we do know, the human spirit is never quite certain how it will react until it is tested. The survivors of Pearl Harbor and what followed were tested and rose to meet the challenge.
Am I dreaming? I can hear screaming. Hiya, Mr. Jackson, everything's okay. A-L-A-M-A-C-O. Oh, what a girl, a real piffaroo. I'll make my bid for that freckle-faced kid I'm hurrying to. I'm going to Michigan to see the sweetest girl in Kalamazoo. Kalamazoo. K-A-L-A-M-A-Z-O. What a gal, a real pipperoo.